I think it was important to get to know her off the court because I do think that, connections, getting to know people really play a part in the success of teams.
In the WNBA, Lexie Hull was nearly finished. Yes, you heard correctly. Everyone anticipated her to step in and take over after the Indiana Fever selected her 6th overall in the 2022 draft. You mentioned that you had a difficult season in a prior interview. What changed then, and how are you able to go on so that the season ended much more favorably? This player did, after all, assist Stanford in winning a national championship. High expectations. But after she entered the league, what did she do? Nothing at all for the initial games. The girl really was unable to purchase a break, and the Fevers weren't exactly burning, don't get me wrong. They were sitting at 1-8 at one point. There are negative vibrations everywhere. It appears that basketball is ingrained in your DNA. During your childhood, you played basketball with your twin sister, your dad, and your grandfather. How was that family dynamic while you were growing up? Our family is very competitive, and you. Knowing that my dad played collegiate basketball meant that I would be exposed to the game at a young age. However, my parents were really eager for us to try every sport in the world. Thus, my sister and I played a variety of games as we grew up. Lexie Hull was having trouble finding her rhythm. She wasn't playing as much as players like Christy Wallace or Katie L. Samuelson, and she wasn't getting enough minutes. To be honest, fans began to question whether she was just another overhyped draft choice. Being on the bench as the team is losing is a unique form of suffering, even though playing in the league is difficult. Don't worry, though, a hero stepped in to save the day. Caitlin Clark comes in. WNBA fans have referred to her as the clutch player, and she was selected 6th overall by the Indiana Fever in the first round of the 2022 NBA draft. I'm referring to Lexie Hull, a professional basketball player. In the best possible way, Clark blew it up. As soon as she entered, you could actually sense the shift in energy. A fresh crew with hope replaced the boiling mess that was the Fever. That hope, too. Although she is quite skilled at scoring points, it wasn't the only thing she did. She gave the group a feeling of direction. The Fever had a leader, a celebrity leader, in addition to a player. It may sound like something out of a fairy tale, but believe me when I say that this was no accident. The Fever didn't simply get fortunate. They didn't suddenly become into good people. They began to have faith in Clark. The magic happened when they accepted her leadership style. And you know who was caught up in that magnificent tidal wave? That's right, Lexie Hull. I'm referring to professional basketball player Lexie Hull, who was selected by the Indiana Fever in the first round of the 2022 NBA draft as the 6th overall pick. WNBA fans have dubbed her the clutch player. Let's now discuss what actually transpired in this situation. Hull's career was saved by Caitlin Clark. She actually did, and I'm not being dramatic, as Clark redefines it. On the court, her vision is unlike anything anyone has ever seen. The girl has the ability to produce passes that make opponents appear to have missed a magic trick. And all of a sudden, Hull, who was little noticed, had an opportunity to make an impact on the court. Additionally, my playing time at the start of the season undoubtedly looked not the same as it was in the end. I thus trusted that I was staying prepared and working hard so that I could make the most of the minutes when I did receive them out on the court. I was therefore quite pleased with myself for having faith in the process and persevering through it. Getting the ball wasn't the only goal. It had to do with Clark seeing Hull's potential. Clark saw a player that only needed the appropriate push and guidance, whereas others would have seen someone floundering. And you know what? She provided it. Clark began to uplift and encourage Hull. Then you're talking about the following one. It wasn't just fluff. That literally gave Hull more self-assurance. Hull wasn't playing like she was about to be forgotten all of a sudden. She had a purpose while she played. Her goal was to win. The transitions basketball component is particularly challenging. Each player on the court was among the top players on their respective collegiate teams. Without a doubt, their high school team's best player. This is merely a collection of the top basketball players. Additionally, you are competing against those who have been there for a very long time. And it was evident. Because Hull's productivity skyrocketed after Clark arrived. What are her shooting percentages? Yes, those have become better. Suddenly, the girl who was having trouble locating herself was connecting on shots, moving purposefully and performing the exact actions that the Fever required of her. Hull was no longer merely sitting on the bench wishing she was having an effect. She was a real athlete, and it was made possible by her relationship with Clark. Hull was no longer the roster's forgotten player. She was a vital component of the Fever's offensive scheme. All of this is a result of Caitlin Clark's assistance. Let's take a moment to discuss that. It was more than just XS and OS. It was about the self-assurance and leadership she brought to each and every game and practice, and Hull needed that more than anything else. Perhaps Hull's career would have been one of those what-if scenarios if Clark hadn't been there to mentor him. However, with her, it saved Hull's career. All of a sudden, the Fever wasn't a complete catastrophe. They had a bright future ahead of them. Right now, I feel like I have a genuine chance to get the ball with every cut I have and every fast break I run, which undoubtedly took me a moment. She's all the way down at the other end of the floor, and I believe it only took one of those to truly make sense to me. Near this end, she might still pass to me down near the block. In other words, it's been fantastic. Clark didn't simply enter the game and shoot a few shots, though. Let's face it, she did. Her influence went beyond that. The team's atmosphere was totally transformed by her. Practices became really intense. Gamers began to hold one another responsible. No more going through the motions, no more sloppy plays. All of a sudden, everyone was fighting to win for each other. To be clear, this wasn't some lovely energy that we're trying to project. It was fiercely competitive and gave this team a tremendous boost. Her admirers had dismissed her. However, Hull began to feel as though she truly belonged in the WNBA after Clark joined the scene. She was no longer merely an optimistic rookie. She was a rival. And believe me, that shift in perspective changed everything. We had lost so many games that we were simply plain miserable. Additionally, we thought we were superior to it. All of a sudden, the Fever were a team that played with intention. There was chemistry in those arenas that were sold out. Yes, they were more than a coincidence. The fans noticed when the Fever subsided. As though it were a playoff game, they began to cram the stands. Remember, though, that this turnaround was not only due to Clark's leadership. She was the catalyst, indeed. However, athletes like Lexie Hull made a significant contribution. Hull's role changed from waiting to who's that to scoring once more. She no longer sat on the bench waiting for an opportunity. She was out there bringing about change. Her shooting percentages, which had been inconsistent, began to increase. And it wasn't just a matter of occasionally making a shot. Hull began to make important shots. That's how you can tell if a player is becoming more popular. With the platform she has developed for herself, it is evident that she views the game on a larger scale. After then, it moves into the game. It's enormous. And I feel like I can rely on her to keep me feeling confident and upbeat. Because as a point guard and someone who makes a lot of passes that result in shots, she will undoubtedly say, "You got the next one if I miss." In my opinion, that simply demonstrates the player. Let's now examine Hull's own tale of redemption. This was more than a case of good fortune or wishful thinking. Hull was employed. To be precise, her butt off. Not only did she get some time off, but the Olympic break was huge for her. The Fever focused on skill improvement during that month, and it meant shooting drills for Hull. Every day, the entire crew kept tabs on shooting percentages, and gradually Hull's numbers began to get better. She was working hard, and her efforts were showing in more than just her grades. They were authentic. Hull was more than just a haphazard role player by the second half of the season. She was starting to play a significant role in the Fever's success. When it counted most, the girl was making shots. What about those shooting percentages? Yes, they rose significantly. Everything clicked for her, even her three-pointers and two-point shots. Hull wasn't merely becoming better. She was doing well. And let's not even discuss the statistics. She was suddenly a real offensive threat, and every game showed it. The Fever from Indiana had a year that will go down in history. How did it feel to be involved in that? I'm so thankful for the chance to play in the WNBA and be a member of a team like the Indiana Fever. Not only have we improved as a team and on the court, but I've also noticed a significant increase in our fan base. What's the bottom then? In this line, one of the most amazing things we've witnessed this season was the Fever's transformation from a 1 to an 8 to a postseason contender. They completely changed their culture in addition to improving their record. Caitlin Clark is largely responsible for the transformation of the team from one that no one took seriously to one that other teams feared. She gave the Fever hope that they could win, not just help them win games. Additionally, Lexie Hull's story is a good illustration of how leadership, perseverance, and trust can transform. She went from playing a little role to playing a major role in the Fever's comeback. You don't see comeback stories like this very often. The Fever are undoubtedly a team to watch, especially with players like Hull, Aaliyah Boston, and Kelsey Mitchell spearheading the attack. One thing I believe that our coaches would post our shooting percentages from 2s and 3s during drills, scrimmages, and everything else every day after practice. We practiced for a whole month, which was essentially during the Olympic break. And I believe that was helpful to me because some people may have thought it's really annoying or something like. However, I found it to be enjoyable. However, don't rely just on my word. Fans are also taking notice. The Fever are selling out arenas, not just packing seats. Support like that doesn't just happen. It is earned. This group has merited it, and we're only beginning, given their trajectory. Be careful, WNBA. It's not only the Fever returning, they're not going anywhere. Caitlin Clark changed Lexie Hull's career, not simply saved it. Hull is currently settling into her rhythm, making contributions and demonstrating to her admirers why she was once regarded as one of the top collegiate athletes. Let's be honest, we've learned from Clark's leadership that sometimes it's not about the numbers or the highlights. Sometimes all it takes to make things better is a little faith and a little cooperation. And Caitlin Clark provided Lexie Hull an opportunity to shine in the same way.